Thank you. Call the meeting to order. Welcome to the O.P.P. Detachment Board meeting Thursday, September 19th, 2024. It's now 10 a.m. We're at Shire Hall. This meeting will be live streamed, recorded, and available on the internet by visiting the county's website, www.thecounty.ca. This meeting will be conducted as a hybrid meeting with in-person and virtual participation in accordance with the county's procedural bylaw. And Becky, I'll turn this over to you, the section.
Thank you, Councillor Binnie. We will begin this O.P.P. Detachment Board meeting by acknowledging that the County of Prince Edward is on traditional land that has been inhabited by Indigenous peoples from the beginning. We thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. We recognize and deeply appreciate their historic connection to this land. Today, the County of Prince Edward is still home to many First Nations and Métis people, and we are grateful to have an opportunity to meet here, work here, and continue stewardship on this land.
Thank you, Becky. Do we have, for the disclosure, pecuniary interest in general nature of? Nobody's declaring anything there. Good. We then move on to the confirmation of agenda. Could I have you move that, Casey and Robert? Could you second that?
Agenda for the O.P.P. Detachment Board meeting of September 19, 2024 be confirmed.
Thank you. All in favor? That carries. Well, then adoption of the minutes. Bill's on there. Good. I see Bill there too. Could we have a mover and a seconder for the minutes of the meeting held on July the 11th?
I move that the minutes of the special
I'll second.
Detachment Board meeting held July 11th, 2024 be adopted as presented.
And Councillor Roberts, that was you seconded?
Yes.
All in favor? Perfect. Thank you. Then move on to deputations. Could I have someone just put this on the floor and we'll get right to the deputation. Bill, could you put that on the floor?
Yes, I'd be happy to.
And seconded Casey. And we'll then have Kyle Binnie come forward.
Good morning. Is that coming through? Just making sure. Maybe I'll adjust it. There we go. Good morning. My name is Kyle Binnie. I am the program coordinator for the YouthReach program that is a part of St. Leonard's Community Support Prevention and Residential Services. For those people that may not know what St. Leonard's is, it's a youth justice focused organization that deals with diverted youth, custodial youth, probationed youth. However, my program actually focuses on a lot of prevention programming, which is new to the organization since about 2018, when we originally started the Intersections program, which is now still available at police referred, but it is now called YouthReach Community Support, just due to lack of funding. I'm here today to talk about our one of our programs that is called Consent and Boundaries. It's a life skills-based program that we are doing within the community, one-to-one, group focus, as well as school presentations. I've had discussions with Prince Edward O.P.P. around tackling the concerns around domestic violence and calls for service around that, which is also under one of the pillars of the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. In hopes that we can educate youth at a younger age for those red flags to look out for in relationships, and not just romantic relationships, but also friendships, etc. So just to go over kind of the content that's available through our YouthReach Consent and Boundaries program. It is gauged for any youth from about grade 3 to grade 12. Obviously, our focus is more on the older youth. I would say that our target is grade 6 to about grade 10. However, we can customize it for any age group. This program, again, is not limited to just romantic relationships. So we incorporate those conversations about dealing with peers, dealing with friends, families, adults, and even our relationship with strangers. As a part of those conversations with schools, we always send a letter to the school that is sent home to the parents so that they are fully informed of the conversation that we're having with the students. That letter usually goes out a week or two before we arrive. And to date, we have not had any youth not be willing to be a part of that conversation, with the exception of one, which was for religious purposes. And before each presentation, we do provide a content warning to all youth that are in attendance and explain that they're there. If they do not wish to participate in the presentation, they are free to go. And if we get into a conversation that is triggering in any capacity, they are allowed to excuse themselves from the space, and we encourage them obviously to connect with their trusted adults to ensure that if there was something that we discussed that was a trigger, that they get the appropriate supports. We also have kids that come up to us afterwards and are available to get our resources and supports as well. So to give an overview of how this works, each presentation is actually 3 hours in length. We don't speak for 3 hours because trying to speak to any youth for 3 hours, they're probably going to listen to it for about 20 minutes. So we break it into about an hour and a half each presentation. And on part one, we're really largely talking about what is consent, what does that mean, as well as like what are the laws around consent. A lot of the time when we do presentations, as you can see in the photo, we have our O.P.P partners attend those presentations with us so that we can have that open dialogue around the law and restrictions around consent, but as well to understand that if somebody has breached that line of consent within the law, that they have a resource like our O.P.P partners to access. We talk about what consent does not sound like or look like, and also the law around sending and distributing nude images, which obviously is I wouldn't say a newer thing, but is definitely something that is happening more regularly and at younger and younger ages all across Ontario. We talk about how to say no and how to ask for any type of help. When we talk about how do we set our own boundaries and what our own boundaries are, we don't really often have that kind of conversation about what our boundaries are, and we encourage the youth to understand that if they have boundaries, that they do not need to change them for anybody that's within their lives. In part two, we switch the kind of focus to start talking about unhealthy, and then we follow that up with talking about healthy relationships. So we answer any youth questions that would have been from part one. So at the end of each part one presentation, we open up the floor to any anonymous question, which is done virtually. So they use their devices to ask any question that's 100% anonymous. We go through those questions and obviously get rid of the ones that are a little bit silly, but the ones that pertain actually to the content and the conversation, we answer all those questions before we start part two. We talk about where we learn about relationships, and obviously we provide a lot of media examples. We talk about unhealthy behaviors, and we also talk about things like the cycle of abuse that you can see a diagram that's on the screen there. We talk about how to get support and then supporting our friends that may be going through an experience of an unhealthy relationship or some sort of abuse. We show a video that's called Walking on the Sunshine, which displays a teen dating violence, but in, again, a age-appropriate manner. We talk about healthy boundaries, and we show we talk about healthy behaviors, and we show a clip of the movie called Up, which just kind of distributes or highlights what a healthy and balanced relationship does look like. We talk about the importance of communication and listening, as well as taking ownership over when perhaps we have been a contributor to some sort of negative experience within our relationships, and with that, a good apology and how to do that. We understand the importance of having interactive elements in our programs because, again, we're dealing with youth. So during those presentations, we have prizes for the youth participating. We have volunteers act out good communication and good consent. We have a giant fry box that we get the kids involved with to talk about the elements of consent, which is, from that acronym of FRIES, is freely given, reversible, informed, enthusiastic, and specific. And we go through what all those elements mean with the youth so they understand those things moving forward, which all, again, tie back into the letter of the law. Is the video not going to play there? That's okay. I can kind of just talk about what's in the video if that's okay. Okay, so within the video that would be displayed here is actually a video from New Zealand, and it was a government-focused kind of media exposure around consent and around as well as media influence, and it actually highlights how easily youth can access things such as pornography. But it's done in a very light-mannered kind of comedic way, but it gets an elephant out of the room about we know that kids can and often do access things like pornography online, and we very well talk about that. Just like the television shows we watch, when we're watching that type of content, it is a show, and we shouldn't be looking at that as a guide for our romantic relationships. When we get into talking about consent, we always ask for the kids to let us know what they think consent means, and you can see kind of from the word cloud that's on the screen, this is from a presentation when we had youth typing in what they felt consent means to them. We use a program called Mentimeter to, again, allow them to chime in anonymously, and it allows them to give their honest answers. And as you can see, again, one of our examples was from a video, was this freely given consent? And we had some discrepancies, and we have that open conversation to talk about why it was not freely given consent. We don't just tell them, we allow them to think, to use their brains and think, and then we go back and pull at that thread a little bit. At the end of part 2, we provide the youth with digital feedback forms that allows us to understand, do we need to change our content? Do we need to add new things? And we were just talking about this before we got started this morning, is over the summer we did do a lot of content revamping, because when we go back and talk to these youth, if they've already heard our presentation, we don't want them disengaged right from the get-go because they think we've already heard all of this. Here's some of the feedback that the youth have said. You guys are great, and I hope that you come again. My favorite part was when you let everyone ask to be a part of the presentation, keep up the good work, come more often. My favorite part was how good they explained it and the videos. That basically wraps up the kind of highlight of our consent and boundaries program, and we're hopeful that we were able to get into more schools with the assistance of the Police Services Board. Reason being is we do have contracts with both the Algonquin and Lakeshore and Catholic District School Board and the Hastings and Prince Edward District School Board. However, if we can echo what's been happening with how often we come to the county and do presentations, we are here probably about for 2 to 3 schools with a specific age range. So we are not having this conversation with all the kids within the county, and with the support of the Prince Edward O.P.P, that's our hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Could you just, do we have any, I appreciate the informative presentation. I certainly learned quite a bit on that. Casey, do you have a question?
I do have a couple of questions, if I might. Who's responsible?
Do you mean like who approves us to come in and speak to the students?
No.
I can't hear.
And is current.
Right. So that would fall under my responsibility. So all of the programs have been developed within our organization. This is not training or programming that we've purchased from another place. So we've developed this all kind of in-house. However, when we get into the conversation around legal, we've actually gone directly to our O.P.P partners and asked, where is the letter of the law? How can we talk about this with the kids?
So to take an example, the law relating to implied consent is very topical in the appeal courts right now. And so how would that get injected into your program on a revision, for example?
Yep, so that we actually just did that under our revision. We even talked about, because we do get the question periodically about what is the age of consent. Again, when we're talking with a grade 4 class, that conversation is probably not appropriate. But when we're talking with a high school class, we have now actually incorporated that into the conversation. So this summer, we did go through and actually we did revamp the conversation around the implied consent, and again, the letter of the law, and we took it directly from Ontario government websites, because previous we were asking from an officer, what should we be putting in here?
I think you're to be commended for that revision, because the distinction between expressly communicated consent and implied consent, I think, is lost sometimes on teenagers. And so I think that's very important. My second question was, does any part of the program deal with the importance of reporting sexual assault, either as the primary victim or as a friend who's been told about it by the victim?
We definitely talk about supporting our friends and talking about the importance of reaching out to a trusted adult. We have not specifically at this point talked or targeted reporting things like sexual abuse or breaches of consent at this time. Again, our encouragement is always to tell the youth, talk to your trusted adults and ask them for the assistance of navigating who should be spoken to about this.
Thank you.
Any other questions from board members? Okay. Since, Bill, I was going to ask, do you want me to read this out? Is it easy for me, or do you want to read it out?
I can read it out.
Okay.
Who's seconding this motion?
Casey is Bill.
Casey. So this is a Casey Bill motion that the deputation by Kyle Binnie, Program Coordinator, St. Leonard's Community Support, Prevention and Residential Services, regarding St. Leonard's YouthReach Consent and Boundaries, Healthy and Unhealthy Relationships Program be received.
Thank you, Bill. All in favor? That carries. And comments from the audience. Do we have anything, Becky? Okay. Any verbal updates from board members at this time? Seeing none, then we'll move down to items for consideration. So the review of the operational budget. Could I have someone put that on the floor? How about you, Robert? Good. Seconded by Casey. So Robert and Casey. And Becky, you wanted to discuss Kyle's presentation, how that's going to loop into that operational budget, if you could talk to that.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Rainey. So through the chair to the board, I believe Kyle is asking for a funding request. So if he just outlines the details to the board, then we would preferably have an amending motion and then carry the whole thing as amended.
Thank you. Want to have it? Do you want to do that now, or yeah, let's do that now.
Sure. So in discussion, when we were talking about how many presentations we may be able to do or over the next couple of years, the ask was around $5,000 would allow us to speak to approximately 10 additional student bodies within the county this year, in addition to the ones that would already be being done through, again, those contracts through Hastings and Prince Edward School Board and the Algonquin Lakeshore District School Board. So this wouldn't be in place of those. Those would just be in addition to.
Thank you, Kyle. Noah, you have wording for that, Becky, once we get into...
Yes.
Do you want to wait? We'll take a vote on that at the...
If any board members have any questions, they can pose them now. Otherwise, I can read the language.
Are there any questions from anybody right now? Seeing none. Oh, Robert, go ahead.
Just want to confirm, would that donation or that contribution come out of our projects and programs line?
Yes, it will.
Thank you.
So through the chair, I'll read that motion. So that the O.P.P. Detachment Board direct $5,000 from the projects and programs line in the 2024 PSB operating budget to St. Leonard's Community Support, Prevention and Residential Services for the YouthReach Consent and Boundaries, Healthy and Unhealthy Relationships Program.
I would move that motion.
Second.
So Casey moved it, Bill seconded. Are there any other questions regarding the financial statement this time? I see none. So let's, why don't we use Casey and Bill? We'll move that motion
that the O.P.P. Detachment Board 2024 operating budget statement as amended be received.
I have a comment.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I'm just wondering, often when I've been presented with budgets in the private sector and occasionally in the public sector, I've asked the author of that budget to sort of give me, what's the story of this budget? What's the elevator pitch? What is this budget telling us about the operations? And I'm wondering if that's appropriate here, or is that inappropriate here?
That's a good question, Bill. What's your experience been with that, Becky?
So through the chair to the board, my understanding is this was a topic that was, or an agenda item on the last meeting's agenda that was approved. So it would have been the right time to discuss it at the last meeting.
Is that clear, Bill?
Yeah, okay.
Any other comments on that before we take a vote on that? So it's been moved by Casey, seconded by Bill. All in favor? That carries. Next is Neighborhood Watch, Neighborhood Protect Program. Could I have someone move that to get that on the table?
I move that the O.P.P. Detachment Board discussion on the Neighborhood Watch, Neighborhood Protect Program be received.
And that the O.P.P. Detachment Board the implementation
of the Neighborhood Watch Neighborhood Project Program in Prince Edward County. Thank you.
Perfect. So we've got Casey move that. Bill, do you second that?
Yep, that's good.
Any presentation comments on that? Okay, all in favor? That carries. We're then on to 9.3 Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. Could we have someone move that to get that on the floor? Bill, go ahead.
That the O.P.P. Detachment Board discussion on the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan be received.
Seconded.
Casey seconded. Any questions or comments? Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it may have been a year ago or maybe 2 years ago, there was a presentation made by the O.P.P. indicating that our community well-being plan had kind of emerged as the gold standard for the province. And I'm just wondering, are we still tracking along the lines of being gold, or maybe working our way up to platinum?
I can answer that, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
Thanks, Bill. Good question. And I'm looking at Julianne back there. I can confirm that Prince Edward County is still in the top tier within the province. Actually, Sean Guscott was making a comment this morning that, where was it, Sean, in Peel, that they were just starting this conversation about the police and the community working together to make the community safe. We've been doing this since 2017 when the provincial government asked us to start doing this. So yes, and maybe Julianne has some further comments from her perspective, but from my understanding, other municipalities continue to reach out to Prince Edward County to see how we are doing. And I can let the board know that just from the amount of meetings that I attend on a weekly basis, the ball is being moved down the field with all of the different pillars. There's a lot of great work being done, just like our presentation that we had today, which is going to have so many impacts within our community down the road. And when I get into my update, I can give you another update with regards to what we are doing from a detachment perspective with the Community Safety Wellbeing Plan. So yes, to answer your question, Bill, we are still at the top, and I will just turn it over to Juliana for her comments.
Go ahead, Julianne.
Thanks. And through the chair, just reiterating what John has stated, Prince Edward County adopted community safety wellbeing planning very early, even before the legislation required us to. We were already thinking in that direction. So we're one of the few communities who are on their second version of the plan. We have revised it. We revised it in 2022, and the current plan goes until 2026. Last year, we were invited to present at an interministerial group about our experience with the plan and the revision process. So we're still being looked to by the province as a leader in the area. And as stated, the plan is moving along really well. Those 5 action teams that are looking at those risk areas are meeting consistently, at least once a month, moving projects forward, making progress. And I believe that we're scheduled to come back in November with a more fulsome report about what the O.P.P. Detachment Board's role in this project is. And one of the challenge points we have right now is leadership and positioning of where the leadership of this plan is. And so hoping that the Detachment Board can help elevate this process within our community, help us bring it out to the community more, and set some really clear objectives for the program, especially as we look forward to the next revision of it that'll start to be implemented in 26.
Thank you, Julianne. Bill?
Just a comment?
Yeah.
Well, well, that's terrific, really. And I'd just like to publicly commend our O.P.P. detachment and, of course, our staff for maintaining us at that gold standard and being a real leader here. So congratulations to all of those involved. It's impressive and important. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Any other questions or comments on this? Becky, I had your name on there. Did you have something you wanted to, or is that?
Through the chair, Julianne answered everything,
She did,
I think.
okay, good. That makes things easier for everyone. So I've got Bill and Casey move this, that the O.P.P. Detachment Board discussion on the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan is received. Bill, you moved that, and Casey second that. All in favor? Then move on to 9.4. Becky, do you have something you want to just mention on this first?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Brainy. Through you to the board, as you are all aware, at the last board meeting, there were some suggested edits to be incorporated into this rules and procedures document. And I have incorporated many of those edits. I just wanted to bring to the board's attention an edit that was not incorporated pertaining to the deputation summary being restricted to 3 pages. As the board members are aware, the deputation on today's agenda had 11 pages. They're most often presentations, and we just simply don't want to restrict to simply just 3. So as long as board members are okay with that not being incorporated, we can proceed with the document that's on the agenda today.
Is everyone okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yep. Could we have someone move to get this item on the floor? Casey?
I move that the Prince Edward County O.P.P. Detachment Board approve the rules and procedures as attached to this agenda to govern the proceedings of the board.
Perfect. Seconder, Bill?
Yep.
Any discussion on that? Can we just go, okay. All in favor? Perfect. Flying right along. This is great. 9.5, so verbal report. Could I have somebody put that on the floor?
That
Bill?
the verbal report of the Detachment Commander related to Part 8 complaints and Section 89 secondary activities of the Ontario Community Safety and Policing Act be received.
Thank you, Casey. Bill seconded that. Get that on the floor, and we'll turn that over to you, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Once again, very pleased to report that as of today's date, our detachment has received 0 public complaints. Of note, last week we had a detachment NCO, which is a sergeant meeting, and had a presentation from Greg Coulter, who is part of our professional standards unit. And he does presentations all over the province, and he uses Prince Edward County as, once again, a bit of a gold standard. When I think that we engage in over 12,000 calls for service and over 3,000 traffic stops, 2,000 to 4,000 traffic stops a year, and not get one complaint, it says a lot to both the professionalism of the officers and the detachment and how courteous they are with everyone, and I'm very proud of that. I will be speaking to that again later on when I give my report in the new Detachment Board report. In terms of the secondary employment, I've received no new submissions, if you will. Typically what I do annually in January, because of the new officers, I will send out a reminder. If an officer has secondary employment, be it coaching job, real estate, that they are to submit an application through professional standards so everything is above board. I maybe get 1 a year. I've never had one that's been refused, but I have had 0 so far this year. And that should complete 9.5, unless there are any questions.
Sorry, any questions from board members? That being said, thank you. That's good to hear. So, with me being new, so we're seen as a gold standard and maybe a best practice, our detachment, which is great news. And kudos to you and your detachment. That's great to hear. Thank you. Could I have Casey? Could you just move
I would
the
move
receipt?
that the Detachment Commander report to the Prince Edward County O.P.P. Detachment Board be received.
That was seconded by Bill. All in favor?
Can I speak to it at some point?
Absolutely, Bill. Sorry, I should have noted that. Go ahead.
We're on 9.6, the Detachment Commander's report. Is that something that, John, you're going to speak to, and I can make my comment afterwards, or?
Well, I'll tell you what we could do, Bill. Why don't you move to put that on the table?
Okay.
And
Okay. Do I have a seconder?
Robert, I have Robert second that. We'll get that on the floor.
Okay, so it's a Bill and Robert motion that the Detachment Commander report to the Prince Edward County O.P.P. Detachment Board be received.
Perfect. And go ahead, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members. This will be the first time that I will have presented this particular report since the inception of the CSPA. They came up with this brand new report in July, and it's much more comprehensive than what I'm used to. And I have quite a bit of time to go through it, so I will go through it in detail. Before I get into the actual report, I would like to just give a brief overview, some highlights of the summer. And I have 10 little points, but before I do, I just would like to ask Sean Guscott to give a minute or two about the Neighborhood Protect. When I asked Sean, this was his idea, and he brought this forward last year as an idea to make Prince Edward County safer, and I think it's a great idea. And I just leaned over to him and I said, how many other O.P.P. detachments in the province are doing this? His answer was 0. So we have the ability to be the first in the province to adopt this with the board's permission, which we've already had. And if Sean, if you don't mind just giving a minute or two as to the benefits of this program, it's already underway. We just need to jump on board, get the word out, and let people know that we want to make Prince Edward County the safest community in the province. And I'll turn it over to you, Sean.
Thank you, staff, to the board through the chair. Last fall, I presented this to the board, and I'd committed to implementing it. And just for some of the people that were still part of the board at that time, my hope was we had asked for a summer student, would have been working this summer, and that they were going to be particularly involved with community safety type programs. And that this particular program, I was going to get that person, if we were fortunate enough to get that summer student to implement this program. And unfortunately, it didn't quite work out. But nevertheless, we're still fully committed to this Neighborhood Watch program. First of all, it's completely free. It's of no cost to the O.P.P., the municipality, the Police Services Board, or anyone. It's absolutely free. And essentially, the program, it removes a lot of the tasks that were traditionally associated with the old block watch program. If you're familiar with that program, that was where a particular person would volunteer, be a block watch captain, and they would rally support from their neighbors. They would have meetings. There was pen and paper involved and phone calls, etc. And they would essentially report things going on into the community to the block watch captain. That person would compile a report and then notify the police, and then there'd be that communication piece back and forth. The Neighborhood Watch program essentially just removes all of those sort of administrative tasks. There's no more clipboard sign-up sheets. They're simply using the website to sign up. The other thing too, it also it's going to help police with doing neighboring canvass when there's been property crimes, etc., that happen. The more people that are engaged from our community that sign up with this program, it's going to lessen the workload on police when they are investigating crimes. That if people are signed up, they can specify a particular area and reach out with all those people via email saying, just letting the neighborhood be aware there was a break and enter on this street. If you have video cameras or having any information or saw anything, whether you were just returning home and you had a dash cam was running in your car, if you could let us know. And it's a way for the people in the community to sign up, and they can post photos and post information. This doesn't replace them from phoning if there actually is a crime in progress. We encourage them to call 911 right away, and we can have officers dispatched. This is just a communication tool. It's the other positive aspect of it is it's essentially already happening now on Facebook and other social media sites, which the police, we don't have any control over that. This is something that through the administrator of the program, it'll give police a better control to be able to monitor the situation, who's posting things on there, et cetera, where from a Facebook standpoint, we have zero control over that. The other thing that's also good about the program is not only can citizens post things on there, we can also post things on there as well. I have a log on right now. There's a lot of police services in the Greater Toronto Hamilton area are using it right now to put messaging out to the public in specific neighborhoods about the auto theft issue. They're putting they're putting photos of people that are in the neighborhood late at night going through driveways, et cetera, that have been captured either by police cameras or other neighborhood cameras. So it is a good tool for us to build a community with the community. And if anyone had any questions, I could certainly answer any of them.
I'd first of all say great work, Sean. I wouldn't be surprised to see this become another best practice. We're the first detachment to do this.
Yeah, there's currently no other detachments that are actively using it. I've heard through the grapevine that some have kind of looked at it, but have, for whatever reason unknown to me, why they didn't implement it. I just see it from the fact that it's absolutely free. It gives us a better control and a better communication tool. There is a similar program called CamSafe, and CamSafe is more tied to just registering your cameras on your property, as opposed to this communication piece where people can set up virtual neighborhoods and where they can communicate with each other. Because at the end of the day, the public is our eyes and ears out there as much as we are the eyes and ears for the public. And they know who doesn't belong in their community. They're the ones now, they're going to be, if they can share that information with us, it certainly helps us. And the other thing that's good about it is it's not specific to residential people. It's not specific to people that you don't have to live here in Prince Edward County. You could be, for example, your primary residence is in the city of Toronto, but you have a seasonal home here. You can register both your properties in Toronto and the one here in Prince Edward County. If you're a business owner, you can register your business on Main Street, Picton, also your house down in Cressy. There's no limitations that way. It's both for business and residents.
Thank you, Sean.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead, Casey.
What is the enrollment procedure to get set up?
Great question. The enrollment procedure is it's quite simple actually. You basically, you go onto the website. This is just one example. It's just a QR code. We can put these on business cards and give to the officers to hand out. You simply just sign up on the website, email address, your phone number. That information is all safeguarded. It's all, when you post information on, it's posted anonymously. But police do have access to that. If somebody's registered on, there's 13 people who live on Ann Street, and we need to send out a message to that specific people, we can email those folks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Casey. Bill, did you go ahead, Bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With the indulgence of the chair and Sean and others, I just wanted to first of all congratulate our O.P.P detachment for being another first in terms of providing safety to our community. This is going to be a segue. Can you indulge a segue?
Absolutely.
It may be of interest to our O.P.P detachment and to those of us on this board, given that the last 8-hour course I took on behalf of the O.P.P, that Becky is all too familiar with my interactions with that course, dealt with Indigenous matters, truth and reconciliation, residential schools, etc. And I think we're all supposed to be taking that course. I'll just take this opportunity to mention that My friend Marie Wilson was one of the 3 Truth and Reconciliation commissioners in that 6-year process. She will be staying with us the week of October the 1st, and she will be doing a public lecture at our public library on October the 2nd at 2 p.m. So if you want the concise, what actually happened at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and what it really means to those communities, impacted communities, you might want to consider attending Marie Wilson's October 2nd to Picton Library at 2 p.m. As I said, she's one of the 3 commissioners, and you will have read in your newspapers today or your online news sources that she was also part of the Canadian Medical Association's apology that happened yesterday, I believe it was, in British Columbia. So I just mentioned that.
Thank you, Bill. I'm glad you did mention that's good information to have. Any other questions from board members? So Bill, could you, do you have anything else, Sean? No, okay. Could you just put that, just to read the receipt of that, Bill?
Through to
I
the
beg your
chair.
pardon?
Through to the chair. I think John wants to speak more on.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah, just hold off on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So now I will get into the meat and potatoes of my presentation. I see I have about 1 hour and 15 minutes. I don't think it'll take me longer than 45 to get through what I need to. I will go through it line by line. Thank you, detectives, for coming by. Before I get into the actual report, I have just 9 little points that I would just like to bring the board up to date on with regards to some things that are happening at the detachment. Every month I send out a detachment update, and I think when I was reviewing my notes last night, I don't think I sent the board the last 2. So at the conclusion of this meeting, I will send the one that I sent at the end of July. I sent a midsummer and an end of summer update, and there's a lot of information that goes into those, and I think just for your awareness, I will send those to be fully transparent as all the great things that are going on in the detachment. Second point, I'm very pleased, and one of the reasons why things are going so well right now is our staffing levels are the highest that I've ever seen. We're at 82%, which allows me as a detachment commander, if you think of a chessboard, I'm able to move pieces around the board. And further on, I'll explain, I have some officers working externally on what's called a TAA, temporary acting assignments, outside of the detachment to assist, and I'll get into that later. A couple of years ago, 2019, just pre-COVID, we were hovering around 66 to 68% staffing, and it's tough to get a job done when you don't have the officers to do it. So that's one of the reasons why things are going so well, and I give our recruiting section huge credit. I also give East Region Headquarters for that. For example, we had an officer patch over from Ottawa City Police. So Steph Etier, a senior officer, just started a couple of weeks ago. Apparently, he is a really good officer based on word of mouth from Ottawa City Police. So he just started, he's on a platoon, and he's moved to the area with his wife, and he's going to be a great addition. We currently have 2 recruits, Cale McCormick, who's 22, Chase Goodfellow, who's 23. They're currently at OPC, the Ontario Police College in Aylmer. They're in their 3rd week there right now. I check in with them every other week. They're having a good time. We just held our crime unit interviews with Detective Sergeant Shane Armstrong the other day. We interviewed 3 very strong candidates. They are all going to get a position in the crime unit. And I'm very comfortable. We are set for the next 5 to 10 years with our crime unit right now with the caliber of officers that we have. You saw Aaron Miller here, and I think what I would like him to do at one of our next meetings, he is going to be, on October 1st, entering in a new role that every detachment in the province is going to have. It's called a DAII, a Detachment Abuse Issues Investigator. So now we have the luxury of having one specific officer to review every domestic violence, every sexual assault incident that's investigated, to ensure proper follow-up, to ensure proper investigation. And this is a big step forward for the O.P.P. So I'm very excited about that. He goes on his official DAII training the 1st week of October. So with the board's permission, it might be good to have a 10-minute presentation from Aaron at the next meeting to kind of give you an idea about his roles and responsibilities. We had interviews for so Aaron used to be our community safety officer. He did a great job for the last 5 years. from the municipality. We had interviews to replace his position. So his position is what's called a RAA, a rotational acting assignment. So we have several positions within the detachment: court officer, CSO, community safety officer, that they're in for a certain amount of time, and then they rotate out to give other officers an opportunity. We interviewed 2 officers for the CSO role. They were outstanding. They were so good that I'm sending both of them on the media course. But the officer that ended up winning the competition was Nikki Cordingley, who, ironically, like Aaron, is from the municipality, went to school here at PECI. I did a walkthrough at the high school with her last week, and not only does she have friends of hers that are teachers there now, but she met teachers who taught her when she was at PCI, so she's going to be a great fit there. In terms of when I said earlier about allowing officers to work externally, so we have one of our detectives, Jason Chin-Leung, who's assisting with a homicide investigation up in Upper Ottawa Valley, and he's the warrant writer. So he's gone from our office. So what that means is he's not able to investigate incidents in Prince Edward County because he's assisting on a CIB, a Criminal Investigation Bureau homicide. That says a lot for our detachment, that they're hand-picking officers from our detachment to write those warrants. So he's gone, and we also have Tracy Colville, who's working with SATER, and you may have, I think somebody referenced it earlier, I think Sean did, about the theft of motor vehicles. That's such a crisis right now in the province. So good for the O.P.P. in East Region. They've created a SATER team, SAITER. So it's a Stolen Auto Intercept team of East Region. There hasn't been any media on this for obvious reasons because we don't want the word to get out, but I asked permission this morning if I could share their statistics with our board, because we have one of our members who's doing an outstanding job. In 48 days of operational work, they have removed 29 stolen vehicles intercepted, so they're over 50%. Tracy got one yesterday. The value of the vehicles that they've recovered is $1.5 million. So they're trying to put a dent in the stolen vehicle crisis that we have, and I give the O.P.P. credit for that. It's only a team of 5. There are 16 detachments in East Region, and one of our members is there, and she's one of the leaders, and so I'm very proud of that as well. So that's kind of our staffing update. When I send the detachment updates, you'll get more of a fulsome, I go down into the weeds a little bit, but I like to keep everybody up to date with what's going on. This was already mentioned earlier. I had a meeting with the County Foundation, Dominique Jones, a couple of weeks ago. I've been trying to get MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, into the school system since I became Detachment Commander, and I think we finally are able to do it. We had a meeting a couple of weeks ago with representatives at the highest level from MAD Canada, met with Catherine McIver and some of her Safe Schools superintendents, and I think it's going to work. We have another meeting coming up in the coming weeks where the school board, and I understand why, they want to see what the presentation is before they let it into the schools. But I think that that's going to be a huge step forward in terms of getting that education, that awareness piece out to our youth. Because I'm always forecasting 5 and 10 years down the road, what can we do now that's going to impact our community safety? And I think getting in the schools, just like we're doing with Kyle Binnie, that's where we have to look at it. And I always say PECI, when you take a look at the population of that school, about 1,000 students, it's a community. Take a look at Bloomfield. It is a community all in itself. So if we can get into that community and start educating these youth now on healthy relationships, on impaired driving, on drugs, the hazards of drugs, we're going to do ourselves a huge favor down the road. I have 3 points left. Point number 7, the Picton Fair. I don't know if you had the opportunity to go to the Picton Fair, but we, for the first time in a long time, outdid the firefighters, I thought.
No.
Them's fighting words.
They are.
Well, actually, Dave Fox is a firefighter, and those were his words, Robert. So, but anyway, I reached out to our East Region. We had the mobile command unit. I had boats, bikes, tents, ATVs. We had a button maker. It was a lot of fun. We were there over the weekend. The weather didn't cooperate so much on the Friday night, but it was really good. We had a lot of positive feedback. I reached out for the 50th anniversary car. So it was a car specifically made to celebrate the 50th anniversary of women in uniform in the O.P.P. We got a lot of media attention. A lot of people visited our booth, and we were right beside the firefighters. And I always say, everybody loves the firefighters, and so we were just trying to keep up to the firefighters. Maybe that's a better comment. Two more points. I'm very pleased and proud, and through Bill, Sergeant Guscott and I have been invited next week to speak at a fall leadership symposium at the base. It's the Air 2 Movement Squadron. And through Bill, he reached out, and so we've met with Lieutenant Colonel and the Chief Warrant Officer, and we're going to be participating in their leadership day, and I thought that was quite an honor. We are both going to be speaking on our leadership styles and our strategies, and we're just going to share what works for us, and I'm looking forward to it, and I hope, Bill, you're going to be there.
Yes.
So I thought that's the first time that I'll be doing something like that. Just for the board's awareness, last year and the year before, I was one of 4 detachment commanders that went around Eastern Ontario, and we spoke about people-centered leadership. It was training that we had as detachment commanders, and then they looked for volunteers to go instruct the frontline supervisors. And so I put my hand up because I could see the value in this people-centered leadership. And what a concept, right? Taking care of your people. And so I'm going to take a lot of the value that I learned from instructing that. I'm going to turn that into my presentation to the military folks on next Wednesday. But really, and Sean and I have had a lot of discussions about this. It's how we operate at the detachment, and I go back to, and I'll talk about it later with our complaints. If you treat people well and you give them the support, they're going to do great work out there. And lastly, I'm going to finish with Family Night, which is October 3rd. The invitations have been sent out. The guest speakers are lined up. I'll be sending you an invitation probably tomorrow. You're all invited. I have Bill Grieve lined up for a meal. And fingers crossed, we get some good weather and we get a good turnout. And the message is going to be great. I also have a representation from our O.P.P Healthy Workplace team, and also from Encompass, which is our organization that helps provide support. So I'm really looking forward to that. Thank you again for the board's support. I've suggested to Bill that we hopefully have around 60. I'm hoping we get around that number. But you'll be more than welcome to attend and participate and see what we can learn about. So those are my quick updates. And unless there's any questions, I will dive right into the formal report.
It's helpful. Thank you.
Go ahead, Bill. Sorry.
Just a very brief comment regarding CFB Trenton and 2 Air Movements Squadron. Just to say that Lieutenant Colonel Demers and Chief Warrant Officer Overton are incredibly impressed with the preparation, readings, structure, and approach to leadership being presented by John and Sean at this leadership forum. So again, another kudo to our O.P.P detachment. It's outstanding. Thank you.
Any other questions? I would agree with you, Bill. I'll also say, John, I was at the Picton Fair, and I would agree with you. You guys really stood out. Commend both of you for everything you're doing. I did have an opportunity to be on the boat with Lori and John out in Westlake a couple weeks ago, and one of the first questions I said to her is how proud she must be to be part of this dream team going on down here. And I do think that you could just see the smile on her face and the pride that she has of being part of your detachment. It's very evident to all of us, so thank you. John, if you want to go ahead with your...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I will also throw out to Robert, I don't know if you've had an opportunity to have a ride-along, but the invitation is certainly there. And I strongly encourage all board members to go out a couple times to see how things operate. I know Casey was out, but you got tied up with a bail hearing on that particular shift. But, you know, a lot of people have no idea what we do on a day in and day out basis. And I think it's very informative for you as a detachment board to get the big picture and to see firsthand, and we are an open book. And I think, and we're always looking for ideas and ways to improve, so the invitation is always there. All right, I will dive into the formal report. Now, there are 15 categories, and I will go through them slowly to explain as much as I can and to answer any questions that you may have. I did reach out to Curtis Gregson, who was kind of the coordinator of this report. And my first comment to him was, can we make the printing a little bit bigger? Because I can't read this. And so he was going to look at the settings for this. So the first category is collisions. And I think I mentioned this to you last meeting, but we're showing a fatal injury for 2024. And I can confirm that that's not the case. And so I reached up through our record management system, and we did find out what ended up happening. And on April 1st, there was a collision on Picton Main Street involving a 71-year-old male driver. As it turned out, when EMS arrived on scene, they discovered extensive medical issues previous. The coroner eventually determined that the cause of death was natural causes, end stages of COPD, severe coronary artery disease, vasculitis, and hypertension. And I believe Sergeant Guscott was a sergeant at the scene. The TTCI, the Technical Traffic Collision Investigator, did not even attend the scene because they determined that the person was, that the result of the collision was because of the medical issues of the person. They didn't die as a result of the collision. And so unfortunately, the officer who did the investigation had clicked a little box indicating that it was a fatal motor vehicle collision. I have since gone in there based on the coroner's determination that it was not a fatal motor vehicle collision. It was a sudden death which caused a motor vehicle collision. So when this report is run down the road, that fatal should go away.
Mr. Chair, can I just interject for a moment?
Sure, Casey, go ahead.
Staff, I misread this report. I thought there had been an error when I saw 2022 fatal injury, one incident, because I knew 2 teenagers had lost their life on Highway 23. So it's an incident, a collision, not the number of fatalities that might have occurred in the collision.
That's a great question, Casey. So this particular report that we're looking at is for the first 6 months, and in 2022, the one you are referring to was that the 2 youths.
That was July though, 2022, wasn't it?
Okay, so we ended up having 4 that year. And so this one here, this one particular one, we had 2 with ATVs. There was that one with the motor vehicle. And then in October, we had one with the young lad on the motorcycle at Danforth Road. So up until this point, maybe I suspected it was the ATV collision. I did run a year-end report for 2023. And in 2022, we did have 4, including that one with the motor vehicle. So when we're comparing the first 6 months of this year, it should be 0. It's showing 1. I'm not concerned about that as we go forward. But looking at our PI, so our non-fatal injuries, so we call those PI collisions, we are at 12, which is down over the last 3 years, which is great. If you factor in all of the motor vehicles that we have in Prince Edward County, we only had 12 PI collisions. I think that's outstanding. I will say that we continue to have problems at that intersection at 62 and County Road 1. And I don't know, you were at one, not just it was the long weekend. And I keep in discussion with Mayor Ferguson. I don't know when that roundabout is going in. It has been approved, but I think that's going to be a great step forward for us in our highway safety once that roundabout gets in. We'll take a look at property damage only, so we call those PD collisions, and they are up. And I don't mind that from a policing perspective. A property damage collision is a fender bender in a parking lot. It's a car hits a deer. I did a radio show with Lynn Pickering 2 weeks ago, and 20% of our collisions are car deer. So if you take 20% of 208, about 40 of those are car deer collisions. And my explanation for that is the deer don't have any natural predators in Prince Edward County, so the population is increasing. So yes, that number is going up. What are we doing about it? Well, I was at a presentation with David Fox the other day. I gave a present to a group of seniors. It's called Arrive 55, and it's a driving program for seniors to help them keep their license. And so we're trying to make those efforts with regards to educating the public. Also through our community safety and well-being plan, we're doing a pedestrian safety campaign in the fall. So we're doing these little things to educate and make people aware. I would like that number to start to decrease, but I am very pleased that our PIs are going down and that our fatalities well, we're still at 0. And they had one in LNA yesterday, as a matter of fact. There was a fatality. So I did a little bit of a look to put things into perspective. Actually, if you go to the next page, it's fatalities when we're talking about. We are at 0, Frontenac so far. So I always compare our statistics with like-sized detachments. So Frontenac and Madoc, we have the same amount of officers, but our demographics are very different. Frontenac has the 401, so they're going to get more fatalities. They are currently at 4. Madoc, or Central Hastings O.P.P, they don't get the influx of tourism that we do down here in Prince Edward County. They're a little bit quieter call-wise. They are at 2. And I know one of them was an ATV collision. They have more of an issue with ATVs simply because they have more trails, and some of them are alcohol related. So from a fatality perspective, and I always knock on wood when I say this, we're over 20 months now without a fatality in Prince Edward County, which is great. And I'm just going to hold my breath until December 31st if we can get through these next couple of months, because that would be a real feather in our cap if we can do that. So I think we're doing the right thing. And from a highway safety perspective, I should let the board know that we are partnered with the QRTC, the Quinte Regional Traffic Coalition, which is partners with the MTO and Public Health. And we do campaigns. We do a Safe on 62 campaign, spring and fall. So we'll have officers lined up from Bloomfield all the way up to Bancroft, and we'll focus on highway safety on 62. I think I sent the media release out the other day. We had a CMV initiative the other day. You'd be surprised at how many vehicles are driving out there, not licensed, improper issues. And so we have Ben Huddleston, our traffic highway safety division team, will come down and they will do specific enforcement in the county. So we're still doing initiatives like that to keep our highways safe at the end of the day. Any questions on that? And otherwise, I'll just go on to the charges, which is the next one. So this is a new sheet on this board. And as I look through, and I'll go through it line by line just to see if you have any questions. And I have Sergeant Guscott here if there's anything that I can't answer. So the first category is criminal code non-traffic. So that would be anything criminal code related, like a mischief, an assault, sexual assault, any criminal code charge. So in the first 6 months, we had 274 of those charges. Compared to 270 last year, compared to 216. I don't have the ability to go in and look at every single one of those. Are they breach of probation? Are they, but so I'm really not too worried about that number. When I look at the criminal code traffic, last year in 2023 was, we ended up with 86 impaired drivers. We've usually averaged 40 over the course of the last few years. But in 2022, we had, and these are actual charges. So if somebody's charged with impaired and over 80 or whatever the new legislation is now, they will get 2 as opposed, it's not just incidents, these are charges. So right now we are at 75. We're down a little bit, but we are still on pace for, in terms of impaired driving incidents, we're still on pace for 70, which is almost double of what we used to. And that's the one area that I'm hoping with Mad Canada, every time I speak on the radio show with Lynn Pickering, we're talking about impaired driving. Whenever I send these media releases out, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you're all on that media release. Lori Josephson is filling in right now, but I think her last title was Proactive Policing Catches 2 Impaired Drivers, and they were out after midnight, 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. doing ride programs, and that speaks to these young professional officers that are out there doing what they're supposed to be doing. That's what I explained to the Rotary a couple of weeks ago. I gave a presentation of the Picton Rotary. One of them asked, well, why is there such an increase in alcohol-related driving incidents? And I said, it's because I think we're being more proactive. Highway Traffic Act. And so I looked at the numbers here, and 920 to 854 to 670. And I thought, gee, that's odd. Like, why is there such a decrease? And so I reached out to Sergeant Paul LeBlanc. He's our operational support sergeant. He works Monday to Friday at the detachment. And I said, do you have any explanation for this? He said, oh yeah, that's easy. He said, we have 5 radars that are out of commission. And I remember back in May, June, is it a G3 radar that it's called? We have these new radars, but they were interfering with the radio system in the car. And and we have new radio systems as well. And so the right hand and the left hand were talking when they put in these radars in the new radio system. So we have 5 radars that are out of the cruisers that are shipped to GHQ. And I'll be honest, just from, and maybe Sean, you can comment on this, when an officer doesn't have a radar in a car and you don't have the ability to stop cars, that's obviously going to decrease the number of calls. Do you have any comment on that, Sean?
Yeah, just the radars had to be removed from the car because it was interfering with operability of the portable radios. And from an officer safety perspective, they had to remove those particular, and we had all our radars we had in our unit and our police cars were all brand new. So unfortunately, we don't have the same amount of radar, because virtually every police car you saw on the road had the capability of detecting the speed of moving vehicles with that equipment. So not having that equipment does negate some of the officers to be able to stop vehicles. And obviously it's, it wasn't shared publicly, so hopefully we can get some newer, so I think it's older radars installed and to work. But they're trying to figure out between the manufacturer of the radios and the manufacturers of the radar equipment to make sure they don't conflict with each other.
Thank you, Sean. The next line, Liquor License Act, looking at the average over the year, 13 to 17. No, so a Liquor License Act charge would be something like alcohol, open alcohol in a public place, alcohol in a motor vehicle. So there's no big issue there. Jumping down halfway down towards the page, traffic-related charges. And this is, like I said, this is the first time that I've ever had to look at these numbers. Now, one of the things and I will say this, is that we lost 2 of our crackerjack officers, Mark Stavin and Ben Huddleston. They were our traffic officers at the detachment, and they would themselves go write hundreds of tickets. They've both moved on to the Highway Safety Division. Good for them. But losing, using a hockey analogy, you lose a 50-goal scorer, you're going to score less goals, and that's one of the explanations that I could have with regards to the decrease in those numbers. Is there any other questions with regards to that? Like I said, this is the first time that I've actually had to look at these particular numbers. Nothing shocks me, but I'm going to bring this to the attention of the supervisors to say, hey, we might have to start doing a little bit more distracted driving and seatbelt enforcement going forward. And if we don't have the radars in the car, what a perfect opportunity to park on the side of the road and look for seatbelts and distracted driving.
You can carry on, John.
Okay. Look at our warnings. So that's the next section. Nothing significant there, 800. And one of the things I do promote, and I say this in all honesty, even to the younger officers, charge the people that need to be charged. And I say, if there's a mom and she's late to get her daughter to a soccer game and she's going a little fast to the soccer game, the officer has the discretion not to issue that ticket. And I say, and as a supervisor, we do not have the authority to tell an officer to write that ticket, because they have to be the one to go on the stand to defend that. So I use that community policing perspective. I'm liking that we're giving warnings, because we can have that conversation on the side of the road that might just prevent that person from speeding going forward. We don't have to give everybody a ticket. One of the beautiful things that we have now is every traffic stop is recorded. So the officer has the ability to go take a look at Mr. Smith that he stopped on the side of the road and say, wait a minute, you were just given a warning last week or last month. You obviously didn't learn your lesson, so it might influence their opinion, but I am a big advocate of just charge the people that you think need to be charged. I will flip to violent crime. And we spoke about this at the last meeting, and I do have a response with regards to the homicide. So I reached out to BMB, which is our Business Management Bureau. This is Curtis Gregson and one of our analysts at Region. And the response that I got is BMB, our Business Management Bureau, is working with CIB, our Criminal Investigations Bureau. I think it's Bureau. They are going to have the same reporting issues with StatsCan and organizational reporting. And until a solution is worked out, detachment commanders will have to explain their PS boards and will have to provide explanations. So the reason why this is a historical cold case, I believe, was from 1990, that when they added it, it somehow is coming up for this year's statistics. I can explain that it did not happen. There has not been a homicide in Prince Edward County this year. And it says they are looking into a solution, but until then, the homicide statistics will not be accurate for the year. So with that, I will move forward on the next category, sexual offenses. We are down a little bit from last year, 28 to 23, but when you compare 2022, it was a 21. One of the things that I can comment on is that we are getting an increase. We had one yesterday, sexual assault incidents at long-term care facilities, and I think I mentioned that before. We are doing some awareness and education with the facilitators and the administrators and the executive directors of these long-term care facilities. If they have somebody who is a repeat offender, I can say that in one of the instances that person has been removed from that facility because he victimized 3 different people. So there were 3 different sexual assaults that were on our books, if you will, but 3 victims and families that had to deal with that. So they are dealing with that. One of the things, going back to Kyle Binnie, is I hope long-term, some of this education and awareness that we're going to be doing in the schools is going to influence those numbers. Assaults, really, if you take a look, 49 to 55 to 55, there's no change there. And an assault can be anything from a schoolyard fight to a fight outside a local establishment to a domestic violence. So they're really, in 6 months to have 55 isn't that big of a deal.
I take it, though, that assaults includes all categories of assaults.
Yes, it does.
Assault causing bodily harm, aggravated assault,
That's
wounding.
right.
All right.
And you know what? And if the board wishes to get that data, I have a cadet now that can go through those. But if there was a really serious assault, there would most likely be a media release if it involved weapons, knives, anything like that. And we typically you don't hear a lot of that. And when I gave my presentation to the Rotary, and I had 9 years of data on the screen, and we had 0 robberies in 9 years, or maybe there was 1, I think, and we caught the guy right away. But people can feel fairly safe when they're walking down Bloomfield Main Street or Wellington Main Street at 1 o'clock in the morning, and they're not going to get mugged. This isn't Toronto, and I think that creates a lot of a feeling of community safety and well-being, that we don't have that violence that you have in the larger cities. The second last category under violent crime, this other offenses involving violence or the threat of violence. So that implies a threat, a harassment, and a lot of these, believe it or not, happen online through social media. We don't call it Facebook at the office, it's Fightbook. People get and they will threaten, we call them keyboard warriors, and they get behind their keyboards and they say some very not nasty, awful things and threatening to harm somebody, burn their house, kill their pet. Well, that's an offense. And so we have to investigate that. And a lot of times the evidence is right there in social media. So there has been an increase since 2022. We're at 30, not that big from last year, but a lot of those threats are, when you look at the substance of them, they're really not that bad. And a lot of them, Sean, would you agree, are social media related?
Absolutely, a lot of them are social media related. And just to go back to the comment the staff was making earlier about the type of assaults, I can't even remember. I would have to go back years of the last time there was an aggravated assault. And certainly stranger on stranger assaults, extremely rare. I can't recall the last time where a stranger assaulted a stranger. I mean, it's very rare. Most of our assaults, they're known to each other.
Thanks, Sean. If there are no questions on violent crime, I'll keep moving on to property crime. We're about a quarter of the way done. I'm gonna have a sip of water here.
Go ahead, Bill. Bill has a question.
John, just a quick one. Are in the long-term care facilities, or is this resident to resident sexual assault, or is this staff to resident sexual assault, or some combination of both?
That is a great question. I would say 90%, if not more, is resident on resident. We have the odd one where there's an allegation, actually on both sides. There's an allegation of a staff member indicating that they've been inappropriately touched by, usually it's a female staff member and a male resident. Alternatively, we've had where the resident has indicated that they've been sexually assaulted by the staff member, and I do know from recent, but that the person making the complaint has some kind of dementia, and so it's unfounded, and I'm going to get into a category later on with talking about unfounded complaints. But to answer your question, 9 out of 10 are resident on resident, and 9 out of 10 of those there are no charges, but there are
Thank
the
you.
odd charge every now and then.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, Bill.
Turning to property crime. So looking at arson, we had 1 in 2022, 0 in 2023. There was 1 in 2024, which Sergeant Gus got investigated, and it was a property-related dispute. I don't know if you want to speak to it directly, Sean?
To the board through the chair. It was an arson investigation, and from a technical standpoint, if you looked at the criminal code, it does meet the. It was an arson. It was a neighbor dispute, but their crown was consulted, and it wasn't the reasonable prospect of conviction wasn't there. So myself and with the fire department, we dealt with it through an alternate means. You know, they didn't have a permit to be having a fire, but there wasn't any serious damage done, and luckily that didn't happen.
And I asked Sean when I looked into that, because I thought, geez, I don't remember any arsons this year, and I'm glad that Sean was the one that investigated, because he leaves no stone unturned. Break and enter, this is one of my favorite categories I like to present on. Like I said, for the first 4 or 5 years that I came to Prince Edward County, we averaged 85 to 90 break and enters incidents. Last year, I think we had 14. So far, we had 8. We're on pace for 16. I can live with that. And I always give credit to our community street crime unit and the great follow-up that they do. Theft over 5,000. We are at 11 this year, which usually, and I think I said this before, usually theft of motor vehicle. But unfortunately, theft of mail is a federal crime, which some of these are actually like porch pirates taking stuff off of people's front porches, which is a relatively minor criminal offense, but it's being captured in that theft over 5,000. I think for the next meeting, I will break that number down just to see how many that is. We get the odd theft of motor vehicle, but it really doesn't happen that lot. Part of the challenge, if somebody steals a vehicle here in Prince Edward County, there's only 4 ways off of Prince Edward County, and we have a pretty good way of setting up a little bit of a dragnet. A theft under 5,000, if you take a look at the numbers, we're right on par with where we are. So that would be anything like a shoplifting, a theft of change or a cell phone from a motor vehicle, somebody stealing garden gnomes. I've seen calls like that. So yeah, we're at 41, which really over the course of 6 months isn't that bad. With regards to fraud, we're at 70 this year, which is down a little bit from last year, but up from 2022. We still have a fraud problem in Prince Edward County. I've asked Katrina to go through the statistics, and I can't remember if I sent them out to you, but I can, the first 6 months, and the losses are staggering with regards to the, I'm gonna send that out to you as well. We still need some education to be done. We did a great job last year partnering with the Businesses Downtown Core, and then Aaron Bucci did some presentations around Prince Edward County. With our new community safety officer, with Nikki Corningley, when she gets trained, we're going to start up the Friday Fraud Talks again. In 2023, if memory serves me correctly, over $800,000 was lost by our citizens. The average loss was over $10,000. And the number one way that people were losing their money were through Facebook scams. So we need to keep educating, especially the seniors, getting the word out there. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is not. And then mischief, down again, 42 in 2022, 25 in 2023, and 24. So a mischief is anything from somebody keys your car, somebody throws a rock and breaks your window, somebody spray paints the side of your house. That would be a mischief. So overall, when I'm taking a look at these numbers in terms of property crime, I'm very pleased with what we have. If there are no questions, I'll move on to drug crime. So they broke this down into some pretty interesting categories. And so I sent our CSCU, our Community Street Crime Unit. We have 2 officers who are constables in there, and they are, like I say, they are rock stars. And I asked for their opinions. Like, we went from 8 possession charges in 2022, 7 in 2023. We're only at 3. And I thought, well, what's the deal with that? So one of our detectives responded, I'll add that the direction from the federal crowns across Canada is that they will no longer prosecute simple possession charges. Essentially, we're going after the drug dealers now, not the users. The simple possession charges will continue to decline due to this. And that was a reasonable explanation. They are looking for the people that are selling the drugs. And I'm very proud of the unit. We used to have a local resident who used to live at a certain address, which I won't name, but that door would get kicked down every other month because they had information through their informants that there was drugs being dealt out of this location. That person has since moved out of Prince Edward County. So because of that unit, we're able to put the spotlight on some of these drug dealers. The other detective reminded me that we did 2, they're called CDSA warrants. One was on Salem Road and one was on Neary Avenue in the recent months. In both instances, 2 parties were charged with 2 counts of CDSA charges, 68 grams of cocaine, 10 grams of crystal meth, 4 firearms. And then the other one, 18 grams of cocaine, 1 loaded firearm. Media releases would be sent out that I have no problem discussing these, but this is the great work that the officers are doing. Day in and day out, we have a team of 6 partnered with LNA, Lennox and Addington, and Frontenac. And this is one of the reasons why, if you take a look at the rest of these columns, and Sean, maybe you can comment on this, but the dealers that we knew in years previous, they're not here anymore. And I think it was because they were getting tired of their door getting kicked in, the tactics and rescue unit coming in with their guns. And if you see in both of these incidents where the officers did warrants, there were firearms located in both. I will submit to the board down the road, a great presentation would be from our tactics and rescue unit and or our community street crime unit. Chad Colbert has made presentations to the board before. They do great work, and I just throw that out there as an option for a presentation down the road. And if there are no questions with regards to drug crime, I will move on to other crime.
I have one.
Yeah.
I take it, staff, the possession line includes possession for the purpose of trafficking, because I don't see it being separated out, although they're distinct crimes. And the second one carries a much more severe penalty.
That's a good question. As I see it, they've got trafficking in the very next one. So I'm wondering if the trafficking is combined, like the possession for the purpose of trafficking is for the trafficking piece. And possession is just simple possession. They had no purpose. They had no intention of selling the drugs that they had on them. But I can dig into that. I know it's semantics a little bit.
P for P, I just don't know which category it's falling in.
I will look into that and I'll find that out. This is one of these things that I've never had to speak about this before. And I look at this cannabis possession, cannabis distribution, cannabis sale, cannabis. We don't have that issue here in Prince Edward County. Now, we might look north of us a little bit, but we don't have those issues here. Anything here that we have cannabis related is regulated. It's legal now. So I'm not sure why these categories are in this particular drug crime category, but now that we're talking about it, I think that I will, pull the curtain back a little bit to say from our people at GHQ, can you explain this a little bit more? Where is this number coming from? Other crime occurrences, and so what they've done here is, and I might look for Sean for a little bit of help here, but you've got other, and I'm not exactly sure what other crime would be. We got your federal statutes, your provincial statutes, and your driving, which is self-explanatory, but when I look at other crime occurrences, what does that mean to you? I don't know, and I might have to reach out to GHQ to say, of these 50 other crime, well, if they're not federal and if they're not provincial, what are they? So I don't know what that one is.
sometimes other federal statutes, even though they're not the Criminal Code of Canada crimes, are described as crimes, like the Customs and Excise Act. Some of those sections actually track wording that's very close to some of the crimes in the criminal code. I mean, that might be an example.
I would agree, but I can't see 50. Like, I can't see
No.
that number being so high. So this is where I think I might send this off to my GHQ friends and say, can somebody help us out here in Prince Edward County? Because I don't know where this particular number is coming from, and I'm a little bit embarrassed that I can't explain it to you. But the federal statutes, the provincial statutes, and the driving offenses is fairly self-explanatory. But the other, I don't know, unless you have a comment, Sean.
Staff, through the board, through the chair, I think maybe some of the Canada Shipping Act charges are just getting miscategorized, because I know the officers doing marine enforcement have been quite busy, and I've seen I've seen the uptick in charges, and maybe some of the Canada Shipping Act charges are just not being captured properly through the UCR stats. When that charge is being captured in the records management system, is just getting improperly categorized into a crime, I guess, maybe.
Chris, through you, when I see other, and now that I look at it, it might also be other criminal code offenses that don't fall into one of the bands that we've looked at on the prior pages. So indecent exposure, trespass at night, I mean, there's God knows how many offenses that are kind of one-offs and obscure that might be just, they don't fit in it neatly in any category, they're one-offs.
And one comes to mind, sir, is like the transportation fraud, taxi fraud,
Exactly.
for sure, and not paying your meal.
That's why I brought them. All right, let's move on to clearance rates. And this is another thing that we've never really had to explain or go over. So a clearance rate, we have a bunch of different classification codes. And maybe I will send that in a separate email to you. I'm going to make a note of that. So when an officer investigates a call, there's different classifications that we can use. So one is cleared by charge. One is it's complete solved. It's non-criminal. We have unfounded, which I'm going to speak to later. So if we charge, I'll use a driving offense. We charge a driver for impaired driver. We know who the driver is, so that would be complete solved. We know who that person is. We could have a hit and run though, where the driver drives off. We do a fail to remain or a hit and run, some kind of criminal code thing. We don't know who that driver is, so that would be classified differently. So this is where they're looking at our clearance rates. And I think to explain it, and I sent something out to the detachment last night to say, specifically with regard to the unfounded, was that we really need to be specific when we're clearing these calls, because now we're starting to measure our clearance rates. Are they accurate? And the focus is going to be on the supervisors to make sure that when the officer clears that call, is the suspect, do we know who the suspect is? And there's a whole bunch of classifications, which I won't get into with regards to that. But this will impact our statistics for Stats Canada and our long-term stats down the road. So if you give me until the next meeting, I will have an explanation with regards to the clearance rates with regards to this. As Sean was looking at them the other day, he said, oh, we're actually doing pretty well. The property crime, the 17.4%. So if there is a mischief, somebody keys the car, well, in 8 times out of 10, we don't know who that person is. So that gets classified as we don't know who the suspect is. We did know who the suspect is in 17% of those property crimes. So that's just basically how those clearance rates work. Any questions on that?
If I might. Clearance, the word clearance is susceptible of a number of meanings. It can mean sort of solved with a number of routes that don't necessarily involve a charge. It can mean a particular charge, and I've raised with the staff, Chris, the issue of impaired driving. And my question about clearance rates is whether when the charges move through the courts, they result in convictions for over 80 impaired operation, or are some of the criminal code charges ending up with Highway Traffic Act careless driving without the stigma and the repercussions of an actual criminal code conviction for a drinking driving offense? And I've raised it in the context of the backlog in some of the courts and delay, and whether there is any ministry policy that would encourage resolutions short of a trial for a drinking driving criminal code offense by way of a plea to an HDA, Highway Traffic Act offense, to move cases through. So the clearance would be, yes, there was a charge, but when it got to court, how was it resolved? And I think that's a matter of public interest, quite frankly.
Yes, and through the chair, and I did speak to Pardeep Bachu with regards to that. I will offer her as a presenter down the road to explain her perspective on that. We did have a conversation a couple weeks based on your email, and she said, yes, that does happen from time to time. One of the big problems with our court system during COVID was there was a huge backlog. Huge. And so based on some of the information that was presented in front of her, there was direction to reduce, and this is provincially, not just in our courts, to reduce some of these lesser, if you will, impaired driving incidents to a Highway Traffic Act careless drive charge. I can't speak if there was a directive provincially from the courts, but and I will say this on the record, Pardeep is one of the best Crown attorneys that I've seen, and I think that she would, if you had any questions from a court perspective and you wanted a presentation, I believe we had one from Mike Lunsky or Polievsky years ago where they came and spoke to the board. This is when we were having monthly meetings to give the court perspective on how things worked here in Prince Edward County. But I'm going to look into the clearance rates so I can have a better explanation at the next meeting.
Thank you.
So the next tab, if you will, is the unfounded occurrences. And when I went through the calls, I thought that some of those were quite high. And when I look at the definition of unfounded, according to the records management system, is after a police investigation is concluded that no violation of the law took place nor was attempted. And I spoke to Sean about it this morning. So for example, somebody calls in a break and enter. They get home, their back door is wide open, so they call in a break and enter. So the officer attends and they do a break and enter investigation. They walk around the house, they go inside, nothing is stolen, there's no footprints, there's no fingerprints. They determine at the end of the day, the wind blew the door open. So the call came in as a break and enter, but at the end of the day, it wasn't a break and enter, but they've done an investigation that might have taken them an hour, and so they would classify that as a break and enter unfounded. And so when you take a look at some of the violent crimes, so a violent crime would be an assault. Somebody calls in an assault, but it could be somebody with dementia that's calling in, and I'll use the long-term care facility, that they said that the staff worker assaulted them. The officer attends to investigate an assault. They investigate the entire scenario. They interview the victim. They interview the suspect. They determine at the end of the day, they watch the camera footage. There was no assault. There was no criminal offense that took place. That would be an example of an assault investigation that was unfounded. And you take a look, the highest number is the property crime, is that people call in, I'll use break and enter. That's probably the one that they get home and they think that their house has been broken into. The officers get there, they do their investigation, do their canvass. There was no break and enter. It was something simple. The neighbor went over to water their plants and they forgot to change the alarm. So we go in with this aspect that we're investigating a break and enter, but we find out at the end of the day it was really nothing. So it's classified as a break and enter, unfounded. So that was my explanation of that. Is that satisfactory for the board? And like I said, I've never had to really explain that to you before. Sean, do you have anything to add to that?
To the board through the chair, staff, we talked earlier about the data integrity project. There was a lot of calls for service that were being categorized as a police assistance, and that there's a program underway. We're trying to get away from using that classification when we're closing off the call. And a lot of times we're struggling as to, well, what are we going to call this? So somebody just think, well, the public's calling for assistance, but meanwhile it was just because two youth were yelling and screaming at each other, so they don't know what. So the officers were just trying to. They don't want to put it as a trouble as youth, so they just reclassify it to this. Well, assist public. So they're going back to no. It is a trouble with youth call. It was just two brothers having an argument. That's fine. So there's no violation of the law. It's unfounded. So some of those police assistant calls that are getting recategorized to more appropriately, they may be driving up the unfounded calls.
Thank you, Sean. So being mindful of time, I see it's 11:35. We only have 5 more tabs to go through. It shouldn't take very long because they're all, I want to say, pretty good news information. So going to complaints, and like I said earlier in the meeting, I'm very proud for the professionalism. I get probably one a week. I get an email or a phone call from a citizen about a traffic stop that they had. I just had one from an officer on Sean's shift. Actually, we were heading up to the base to have a tour from the lieutenant colonel, and one of his officers had stopped a vehicle on Highway 62. The driver was suspended. She could have towed his vehicle, but she decided to have him call a friend so that he could make those arrangements. I got the nicest letter. He actually sent it to the commissioner's office. I could probably share it with you and just black out the name. But he just went on and on about how professional and courteous this female officer was, even though he was suspended. She treated him respectfully, and I say this, I get these all the time, and it really makes me proud. And I think, and Sean can attest to it. And you spoke to Lori Josephson. I think if you were to canvass the officers, they're very happy to work in Prince Edward County, and we promote that positivity. So when I go back to earlier, you think of all the incidents that we've gone through, all the traffic stops, the foot patrols, the domestics, and we haven't had one complaint so far. Is to me speaks to the professionalism of our officers, and I promote that in the detachment updates, which you'll see, and I think that officer doesn't want to be that first one that gets the complaint coming up, but it's one of those things that whenever I do get a positive letter or email, I post it outside my detachment to promote that positivity and to keep being professional in the community. Looking down at the daily activity reporting. So every day at the end of a shift, an officer has to do what's called a DAR. What did that officer do during the day? So the first half an hour, they have to click on shift preparation. And then maybe right now we're doing school patrol. So they might go to PCI and do a walkthrough at the school for half an hour to an hour. And then they might do a traffic enforcement up at 62 and 1. So they classify what they do in a day. The number that jumps out at me right now is the Marine Patrol has basically doubled, and that's thanks to Lori Josephson and Aaron Miller. They were out there a lot this year, and when I gave my Marine report to Lynn Pickering a couple of weeks ago, charges were down, and I think that's because of the education that we're doing. One of the things we did this week, and this is for the board's information, the detachment purchased 10 safety kits. They're about $10 each. And I said to Aaron Miller and Lori Josephson, if you catch a boat and they don't have their safety kit, don't give them a $180 ticket. Give them a $10 safety kit and make sure that they're safe. And that's that education piece that we're trying to promote. We want people to be safe at the end of the day, and I think it's working. You look at our foot patrol hours. That's another thing I promote within the community, is to get out of your cruiser and walk downtown. I don't know how many times I've seen you, Bill, when I'm out there doing it. And Jason Henry, one of our sergeants, he does that every shift. Even at 2 o'clock in the morning, you'll see Jason walking down the street. And I think that's good. That's what this community wants. They want to see our officers out in the public, in the schools, at ride programs. And I think so far we're doing really well, and the numbers speak for themselves. I will go to the next category, which is youth charges. And previous to this board, and I think I can speak to this because it's been on the record in previous meetings, we had a huge history with a local group home in Prince Edward County called Bayfield. And years ago, late 2019 and 20, we averaged over a call a day. I think we were up to 370 calls in a day. I tell the story one day, Chief Superintendent Chris Harkins, who's now the Deputy Commissioner, came for a ride-along, and he doubled up with Paul LeBlanc. And in that one day shift, they had 3 calls at Bayfield, 3. And as a result of that, and I give Paul LeBlanc credit for this, he took that as his project, and he partnered with CAS and Bayfield, and they basically created a little mini situation table for Bayfield. And over the course of 3 years, we were able to reduce those calls for service from 370 to, I think it was around 65 in 1 year. And Paul is still monitoring that, and I think we had, 26 so far this year. So we went from 1 a day to basically, 5 a month now. So really, really good news there. You take a look at the numbers in terms of our charges by disposition, we're down. Everything. Look at the non-conviction from 2022 to 2024. So 44 to 6. And I will just say, one of the things that used to skew our youth data in Prince Edward County was Bayfield. I don't know how much you know about Bayfield, but it's the youth within the province, sometimes the country, that have nowhere else to go, and so they send them to Bayfield. And we've had meetings with the mayor, Todd Smith, back in the day, to discuss how we can improve these calls for service. And I give them credit. They've really done a great job working with us, working with prolific youth. And the idea is to reduce those calls for service so that the officers don't have to go there 2 or 3 times a shift, and now they're just going there maybe 2 times a week, so that they can do other things like foot patrols and ride programs. So we are doing a great job there, but I go back to, it's those relationships that were built we can't do it ourselves. And it was the relationships that were built with Bayfield, with Paul, the CAS, and it really does take a team to make this better. So if there's no questions,
Do you have a question, Bill?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, John. John, is there a pattern at Bayfield? What, in terms of the nature of those calls? It's just curious.
I'll let Sergeant Guscott answer this. He has a better finger on the pulse than I do.
Mr. Roberts, through the chair, the majority of the calls are typically the youth leave the facility, they run away, and then while they're out in the community, they end up most likely committing property crime. And just getting back to that number, the 26 calls so far this year, I think well over half of them is one particular youth, one prolific youth, and I know that Sergeant LeBlanc is working with Bayfield to reduce that. So like out of those 26 calls so far this year, one is one particular individual. But typically that's what they do, sir. They leave the facility, they go on foot, and then they end up committing property offenses.
Yeah, thank you.
Moving on to our Mental Health Act occurrences. So mental health and addictions is one of the pillars in our community safety and well-being plan. And I provide regular statistics to the community safety well-being plan. You can see our numbers are going up, and Sean is our mental health liaison for the detachment. I give Sean 100% credit for his work. He was one of the main drivers for getting IMPACT, the Integrated Mobile Police and Co-Response Team in Prince Edward County. That has greatly assisted our officers, but we still have a significant issue in Prince Edward County with regards to mental health, but we are doing some work on it. And you're going to see through the community safety well-being group, that action team, there's and I forget the name of in October, it's World Mental Health Day. So we're going to be doing some promotion with regards to that. Part of the problem for the board's awareness is we don't have the resources in Prince Edward County. A lot of times there's a 3 to 6 month wait. So if somebody's in crisis, our officers go, we de-escalate, we have IMPACT to follow up, our IMPACT worker. And we say, yes, we can get you into a treatment, but we can't get you in until February. And that's unfortunate. That's the way the system is. But fortunately, because we have these IMPACT workers at the office every day, and we also have an ITW impact transitional worker who works Monday to Friday. We're able to have that follow-up. Yesterday, as an example, one of our officers took the impact worker to follow up with somebody who had a mental health. They had a Form 2. They refused to leave the house. This was last week. They were able to talk that individual into coming to the hospital, and that individual was formed yesterday, was apprehended on a Form 1. Back in the day, we didn't have the time to do that. We didn't have the resources to do that, and now we can. We can reach out and give them the supports with regards to the MHA. So I see those numbers are increasing. That is just as a result of what's going on in society. And one of the things that I'm going to ask our cadet Katrina to do is, of those 79 MHA incidents, how many are the same individual? We do have a prolific individual in Prince Edward County that we deal with on a regular basis, and when our numbers drop, it's because that individual is incarcerated. That's just sad, but that's just the way that it is. But I'm going to get some more specific data, probably towards the end of the year, maybe at our meeting in January. I can drill down into specific MHA incidents because I know that the action team and the Mental Health Act is looking for that. Sean, anything to add with regards to MHA?
To the board, through the chair. Obviously, mental health calls are extremely complex calls, and we're very fortunate to have a professional mental health clinician available to go with officers to these calls. And some of the times, just like the staff alluded, it took repeat calls to deal with that one particular female who finally did go to the hospital. And sometimes it is up to 10 times the impact worker follows up when the officers make the referral or go live, co-respond to that call. So it, unfortunately, sometimes that does drive the numbers up, but it's not because of lack of trying, for sure.
Just on, and you talk about the following up, we actually have a hoarding coalition in the county, which is doing some great work. We have a big meeting on November the 20th. And a lot of times in hoarding, there's a mental health component to that as well. We find that mental health impacts so many of the pillars: domestic violence, poverty. There's usually a mental health component in there. Its web is spread far and wide. And so as a community, my personal opinion is that if we can somehow increase the resources for these people that can get the help, maybe we can, and I said this at a meeting last week in Bloomfield, if we can get the help before they actually have to call the police, they don't get to that crisis situation. If we can get them the help earlier, then they can get on and get better and take those steps. But right now, unfortunately, our resources are limited within Prince Edward County through CMHA, HPE Public Health. We're having a difficult time getting the resources here, and I'm sure everybody's aware of that. I see it's 11:48. I only have 2 more categories to go. These will be very quick. Our overdose incidents, self-explanatory, zeros for 2023, zeros for 2024. That's excellent. That's both fatal and non-fatal. So even though we border Belleville, for whatever reason, the police, and I'm not to say that issue is not here in the county. I do know anecdotally that EMS go to those calls, but we haven't been called for whatever reason. I'm sure if you checked with Picton Hospital, they would have different statistics, but from a policing perspective, we haven't had the opioid-related issues that they have had in nearby communities, and I'm very happy with regards to that. On that note, a couple of weeks ago, I partnered with Jeremy Owens with HPE Public Health, and we actually had a display out in front of Giant Tiger on International Opioid Awareness Day. I believe it was August 18th. And we had a display on Picton Main Street. We were handing out naloxone kits. We were handing out flyers. We were talking to people. Our impact worker, Lindsay Ferguson, was there. It was a good public event, but that's that awareness and education piece that I think we can proactively bring to the community, because a lot of people don't know what's going on. And lastly, I'm very, very proud with this as well. And I sent Leah Morgan, she's the executive director for Victim Services. I sent her a little screenshot of this slide last night, and I said, I'm not sure if you're aware, Leah, but we're doing really well with not only the number of times that our officers are offering victim services, but the number of times that it's being accepted. And really what we want to do is we want to help these victims. And if you take a look at the categories, where and when we're referring victims to this. So domestic dispute by far number one. And we know from talking to Julie Watson at Alternatives for Women, there is an uptick in the people that are accessing their services, which is great. We want to help those victims. Assault would be number two, sexual assault, sudden death, harassment. So our officers are out there, they're going to these very challenging situations. People are in crisis, but they're taking the time and they are offering the victim services. And I think that's great. And the fact that not only are our offers going up, but the fact that they are accepting is, well, it's almost doubled from 2022. Once again, I think speaks to the professionalism and the delivery and the compassion. And I will say a lot of times it's the sergeant who's at the scene and who's making that referral. And so this is a good news statistic. I got a really nice email back from Leah Morgan this morning complimenting our officers for doing such a great job out there. Because really at the end of the day, who wins? It's those victims out there, and they can get the services that they need so that hopefully they don't have to call the police anymore. And with that, I believe that is the last one here, the Detachment Board information sheet. It's just basically where that information came from. That was about an hour. I started at about 10:45. Any questions overall?
Thanks, John. That's a very encouraging report. We're on a great curve. Any questions? Go ahead, Casey.
I certainly echo the chair's comments, absolutely. I would just note through the chair that I've continued to dialogue with the staff with respect to impaired operation by alcohol or drugs, and our sort of breakdown to look at patterns with respect to offenders and interdiction success operations. And I think we'll continue to do that sort of going forward with a view to sometime early in the new year, perhaps coming back with something to show the board.
Bill and Robert, you good? Robert, go ahead. Your volume's off, Robert.
Through the chair to John, just wondering if you could give us a quick summary of your experience this summer versus other summers in Prince Edward County with regards to the influx of tourists and what the experience has been for you this year.
That's a great question. What I'll do is I'll send you the email that I sent to Lynn Pickering. We had a busy summer, but it was not as busy as previous summers. And I think if you speak to local businesses, local business owners, they will also say that the tourist traffic was down a little bit, but we did have a busy summer. And I'll see if I can send the radio show, the last radio show that I did with Lynn, because we talked about that specifically, about our calls for service over the summer. It's a big file. I'll see if there's some way that I can share it with you. But prior to the radio show, I sent her our statistics, and I will send that to you as well. And it kind of gives an overview of how many of this call and how many of that call. And you can tell just by looking at the numbers, our officers were busy. But I go back to, once again, the big calls, the fatalities, the PIs, they're down. So we don't mind going to the alarms and some of these minor calls. I think if you take a look at the big picture, our victimization is down overall, which is really good. But on any given day, and I think I can let Sean tell you, or any of the officers, we're busy. And you know, a sudden death call. Sean had an officer at a sudden death call on the long weekend, and he was there all day. And so sometimes one call can take up 8 or 10 or 12 hours just with the reports and everything. So you never know what you're going to get. That's one of the things I love about policing. There's not 2 days that are exactly the same. But we had a busy summer, but it was a successful summer. And I will go back to our staffing. And I think the wellness piece at the detachment, when I hear laughter and people having fun and having barbecues at lunch, and we're still having fun, but we're getting the job done, as opposed to 2019 when we were at 66% staffing levels and everybody's burnt out. People are calling in sick. We're having a hard time getting overtime. It's very different from then, and I'm very grateful for that.
Go ahead, Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. John, I think Chris and I, as counselors, can sympathize with the you never know what you're going to get from day to day in our role at Shire Hall. I just wanted to say that I'm really keen on being part of a squad car ride along, perhaps in the last half of October, if that's possible. I really not only enjoyed, but learned a great deal doing a marine ride along with Aaron Miller. And if I could just mention that to you and to Sean, life is a little booked between now and the last 2 weeks of October, but if sometime in the last 2 weeks of October, I'd welcome doing that.
I agree with you, Bill. I think all of us, I know Casey's been out. Robert, I would certainly encourage you to go out. I was on a drive along last year with Sean's unit. As you just said, learned so much, and the marine opportunity this summer was also equal to that. So definitely. Go ahead, John.
No, absolutely. And I encourage all board members. And I say this, I had the Rotary presentation a couple weeks ago, and I used to take people out for ride-alongs, but I don't have a body-worn camera anymore, so I think they don't let me go out on the road anymore. But at the end of the meeting, I held a draw, and a couple of lucky Rotarians were fortunate enough to win a ride-along, and one of them went out with Sean, and they had a great time. And I always say the only thing I ask is go back to your group, whatever it is, and tell them about your experience, because like I said, people have no idea the technology that the officers have in the car. But also sometimes some of the calls that our officers are going into are pretty traumatic. And anyway, it's an eye opener for sure. So I welcome it. Sean has just agreed to he's volunteered, and so just set it up with him, and I can give his email.
Great. If there's no other question, I just had one quick question. So earlier in your report, you talked about the scenario at 62-1. Couldn't agree more. I know Bill will agree. We did have a presentation from the province probably about 5 months ago saying that it is approved, but it could happen between now and the next 5 years. If there's an opportunity for you to maybe get in their ear and voice that, I agree. It's a frightening intersection, and if we can do something on your end to maybe expedite that, would be terrific.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How about this? I will have some statistics at the end of the year. I personally took a photo at the collision that Sergeant Guscott was at a couple of weeks ago, and then we as a community, municipality, as a board, as a detachment, and the mayor, I know the mayor is on board as well, we can do something, make some kind of a message to the provincial government to say, can we speed this up? Why? We want to save a life, and we've been just so fortunate, knock on wood, once again, we have not had a fatality at that intersection since I've been here in 2014, but we're inches away from that happening. So absolutely, I would propose that we submit something formal to the province in January or February of next year.
Thank you, John. And I had Bill and Robert. Bill, could you move receipt of the Detachment Commander's report?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Who is the seconder?
Robert.
This is a Bill and Robert motion that the Detachment Commander report to the Prince Edward County O.P.P. Detachment Board be received.
Thank you. All in favor? That carries. I just wanted to make sure that I did capture what John said. Becky, could you make note that we'll have Aaron Miller at our next meeting present? And before that, thanks for all your help and support today too, Becky. We'll then move on to our November 21st will be our next meeting. And if I could have someone move adjournment, it's 11. Wow, we really right on the button by a minute. So 11:59. Could I have someone move adjournment?
Motion to adjourn.
Casey and Bill, all in favor? Great. Look forward to seeing everybody at the O.P.P. Well, I guess it'd be what would you call it, John?
It's a Zone 2 OAPSB, Ontario Association of Police Services Board meeting. They're very informative. I always try to attend. I know Sean attended last year. I think you'll learn a lot. It'll be very interesting, especially when you hear some of the challenges from other boards that they have that we don't have. So I look forward to attending, and I'm sure we'll learn a lot tonight and tomorrow.